Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Jules and on my channel I love to talk about colour and share art supplies with you, especially, historically speaking, watercolours. We've had a little break from watercolours for a little bit, not really like a planned one, but I think I just got maybe a little bit burnt out on doing so much of the similar kind of stuff, but we're back. Today I have the craving again. I have some very fun new art supplies which are arriving with me in a couple of days, and so that will be a very exciting video for the future. However, today I thought we could do perhaps another edition in the series of looking at all of my watercolors from a certain color group, and I thought we could maybe look at violets today. Purples, violets. Not sure on the semantic difference there. But I have been wanting to get back in touch with my watercolors, and so here is a nice video to ease us back into that. So I have here I've ruled out a sheet for a swatch sheet for all of the types of purple violet colors that I have in my collection as it stands. And to swatch from, I have my ultimate palette, which is to this day one of my most viewed videos. So check that one out if you haven't already. But as you can see, it's quite well loved. And then I also have this sort of auxiliary tin, which is where I have a couple of these where I'm keeping my sort of overflow colours from that I'm not using in my main palette, just by colour family. And yeah, so this is a swatch card that I've ruled out on Clairefontaine Goldline Aqua watercolour paper, which is just cellulose student grade watercolour paper. And I thought we could use an old friend, my #1 Da Vinci Spin Synthetics quill brush. I'm so good to be back with these. So basically my idea was that I wanted to look at the different hues of violets that I have in my collection. Maybe we could decide if, all of them are absolutely necessary, though, spoiler alert, I think they probably are. And we can have a real look at the differences between them, and maybe, you can use that information to decide which ones you might like to add to your collection. So, without further ado, let's get started. I'm starting actually with a colour which I would not describe as a violet, but I thought I would include it as a comparison in case it would make sense to do so. So I'm going to include this quinacridone fuchsia from Roman Schmall, which is a colour that I reluctantly bought after, spending far too long without a quinacridone magenta colour in my collection. So I wanted to have it as a comparison so you could see what the sort of magenta shade is as a reference for how blue or pink the following shades of violet are. So as you can see, this is quite a nice shade of magenta, quite vibrant. Hopefully the lighting is treating me well today. It's quite a dull day here in Germany this morning on this fine Sunday morning. But I really do like this colour. I haven't really played around with it that much. I should probably do a mixing video on it. I'd really like to bring back the mixing videos that I was doing before. I really just need to get my mojo back for that one. But so we have a reference. This is what I would describe as a very magenta purple kind of colour. Like, this would mix beautiful violets with just about any shade of blue or any of the other shades of violet on this sheet, I think. So that's like there for our reference. And I think it's particularly relevant because the next colour that I want to swatch for you is from this tin over here, where I keep my spare colours, and it's this quinacridone violet, also by Roman Schmall. And it is quinacridone violet PV19. So PV19 is the canonical pigment, if you like, for quinacridone violet. And it can come in red shades, which I believe is like PV19 alpha, and more violet shades like this, PV19 beta. So it really depends on the reflectivity or something. I'm not a physicist. I almost said physician. I'm not one of those either, but it would have been the wrong word. So I've included all of the pigment information here also for your reference, and then in brackets I've included the brand information just so if you're checking this back from a screenshot or whatever later, and you can see exactly what I was talking about. So you can see here the very slight difference. So this is the quinacridone fuchsia, so more the magenta shade, and then the quinacridone violet is more of this, well, a violet shade. So swiftly moving onwards, onto my favorite shade of violet. So I guess the other background for this video is that I'm not a huge purple person. Like I think purple is a beautiful color. I think all colors are beautiful, really, but I do prefer a more muted, warm toned purple, and this perylene violet from Schminker is my favorite kind of single pigment violet for just using straight out of the pan, out of the tube. And it is really this wonderful sort of wine, purple, burgundy. I'm sure you could come up with a million descriptors for this color, but and I found that I like the Schminker one the best. I've also owned the Roman Schmall one, which is a beautiful paint, perfectly good, but I think I prefer the Schminker one because perylene colors can often have a drying shift, and I find that the Schminker one does not suffer from that quite as much as the Roman Schmall. Or in fact, any of the other brands. It's not just that's not a reflection on Roman Schmall. It's just a reflection of how good the Schminker one is, I think. However, something that is a very positive reflection on Roman Schmall is this colour, which was released, I think, last year or the year before, and it is Aquarius Violet, and this is one of Roman Schmall's specialty colours. So it's a super, well, not, I guess super granulating is probably now taken as a term by Schminker, but it is a granulating colour, so it's made with ultramarine blue, PB29, and the quinacridone violet or red, PV19, and PR255, which is a pyrrole scarlet. And as this dries, it just looks like a kind of grey violet right now, but as it dries you will see that it separates into its component shades and ends up with a really nice effect at the end. It almost looks like it really looks like a plum to me. You know how plums have that blue sort of bloom on the skin, and then that sort of red colour underneath? That's exactly what this reminds me of, so it had to be included in the video. Trying to sort of go from warm to cool here, though, yeah, it's a little bit difficult to put them in an accurate order. So up next, while we wait for this one to show us its magic, is Manganese Violet, which is PV16. This is a colour that is carried by a lot of brands, and I think it's actually one of the most permanent violet pigments that exist. So PV standing for pigment violet, if you're not familiar with that. And it is a granulating colour, and it's a beautiful purple. Not really my cup of tea, let's say, but I know that a lot of floral painters really like this. It's probably also quite good for portraits, I can imagine, because it makes quite nice mixes and would be good for creating shadow colours maybe. But I think it's a beautiful colour. I have to keep it in my collection because I think that if you're a paint collector, I'm not really a paint collector, more of a paint user, but if you have a PV16 in your collection, then you're doing really well in terms of violets. And kind of in a similar vein to me, like this next colour has a kind of a similar vibe to me as Manganese Violet, and it's Ultramarine Violet. So I have also the one by Roman Schmall, and it is perhaps slightly less tinting than Manganese Violet, but also a granulating colour. But you can see how much cooler it is, how much more blue toned this purple is. This is far more my preference, let's say. I prefer a bluer, but I prefer violets that are either really red, like the perylene violet, or really blue, like a lavender kind of colour. And this is really in that zone for me. I really enjoy the look of this colour, and I definitely know that people use this in landscapes for shadows. Up next is a Mineral Violet from Roman Schmall, so another multi-pigment colour. So most of these paints, as you can see, are made of one pigment, which makes them very good for mixing, because single pigment colours produce really clean, beautiful mixes. If you're not familiar, I know many people watching this video have probably heard this many a time. Is this the right one? I hope it's the right one. We'll definitely see later. But so this is one of the two multi-pigment colours, which is made with PB29, so ultramarine blue again, that very standard blue that you get with your starter watercolour set usually, and PV19, which is this quinacridone violet or quinacridone red. and I think it's a really, really beautiful color. I'm always a little bit unsure which purple I've picked up because it's right next to the dioxazine violet and they look very similar, as you will see. However, if I do drop a little bit of more water in here, then we will definitely see. I can already see the ultramarine blue settling into the texture on the paper, like it's a heavier pigment, so it sits in the paper and really creates this beautiful granulating effect, which sometimes you want and sometimes you don't want it. And if you don't want it, then I would recommend as a replacement this dioxazine violet, which is a beautiful standard violet color that is often, you know, if a set includes a violet, it's often this one. And usually dioxazine violet is PV23, this pigment that's indicated in the next swatch. However, Roman Schmoll is a little bit off-piste and uses this PV37 instead, which is also a dioxazine chemical, I believe, because it's still called dioxazine violet. But it's just a slightly different pigment. And so I have this one, and then I have the traditional PV23 from Schminke next door here, and I figured we put them next to each other and we can have a look and see how they compare. So I have the Schminke one in my Ultimate palette just above me over here, and I chose this one to keep in my Ultimate palette because it's just so rich. I don't know, it looks almost black in a real mass tone like that. So I've been trying to wash these out so we can really see the full range of the colour. And it does have a drying shift, so it doesn't always look this dark. But you can see just I think it's maybe a little bit more blue toned than the Roman Schmoll one. Something I had not considered. So this is always important to spend some time with your colours. I know some people would consider swatching a waste of paint, but you know, I mean, even if it is, it's my money and my paints, so do with your paints as you will. But I like to just look at them and try and really understand them, and I find that this translates really well into when I need to, for example, choose or mix a color for a project, that I get a really good I have a really good understanding of what paints that I own. But yeah, I think this is definitely more blue toned than the Roman Schmoll dioxazine violet, and I think it also has more of a rich mass tone, which may or may not be what you want, depending on what you're making, of course. And then finally, we have Strontium Violet, which was another new paint from Roman Schmoll last year, I believe. They've recently released 3 new paints, by the way. Don't think that I didn't notice that, and don't think that I have not bought them. There will be a video on those, absolutely. But this PV62, and I bought it because previously to this, I owned the Schminke Cobalt Violet Hue, I think they call it, which is the same pigment, PV62. And I thought it was a nice colour, but it was a little bit gummy, like it had a bit too much binder, I think, for me. Beautiful shade. Like I said, I really like this shade of purple. Oh, it's almost a blurple, some people would call it. But the Schminke one also had a very different granulation. This is a very granulating colour, and I love it for that. But it was granulating in a different way, and maybe one which I liked a little bit less. I mean, to be fair, I still don't know how I feel about the colours which are so, like, really, really granulating. I mean, you can see this on the paper when there's no bubbles, how it's causing this texture, which looks really, really beautiful in mixes. And I really want to just get back into doing some more paintings, to be honest. I've been doing quite a lot of paintings with acrylic markers lately, which I've really been enjoying, and also coloured pencils and things, but we're going back into watercolours now, and this is the beginning of that journey. So I will not make you sit here and watch paint dry. I'm going to wait for these to dry, and then I will come back, give you all a close-up, and we can have an even better look at how these colours perform when they're dry. Okay, so just a couple of seconds for you, and about one side of a record and one fancy cup of tea later for me. We are back. These paints are still somehow not entirely dry at their wettest parts, but there's certainly enough here to see the overall impression. So hopefully you can let me know in the comments which of these is your favourite, which violet is on your palette, and which one do you find yourself using the most often. And please do remember to like the video and click the subscribe button if you like stuff like this. I know, you know, it's a cringe task, but if you don't, then I think sometimes people forget. I certainly forget. But yeah, so here we are. As you can see, there is a drying shift with watercolor. Most colors do get a little bit lighter when they dry. So we have this shading from magenta through to a really blue tone here. And a couple of things that I would want to highlight. I mean, the quinacridone colors are beautiful standard colors that everybody loves and uses, especially in floral paintings where you really want that high transparency and glowing vibrancy from the color. However, the Aquarius violet is it's just absolutely stunning. I mean, I don't even know, like when it's wet, it looks more violet, and then when it's dry like this and the separation is so strong, you could use less water with it and give it less room for maneuver, and it would be more of a homogeneous violet color. But I really wanted to show you how it separates on the paper. It looks like a violet sort of more from a distance, but up close you really see that pyrrole scarlet in the PR255 there, and you can see at the top there it's still quite wet. And then we have the manganese and the ultramarine violet, which are, I would say that these three colors, manganese violet, ultramarine violet, and strontium violet, are kind of siblings in the sense that they have a lot of the same properties. Manganese and strontium violet are more granulating, whereas ultramarine violet has a bit more of a finer granulation. However, they follow this sort of warm to cool gradient, with manganese being the most pink and strontium violet being the most blue and ultramarine violet being in the middle. If I had to choose one, I would choose the ultramarine violet. I just like the hue the most. But it is a low tinting color, so you need a lot of it in mixes if you're mixing it with high tinting colors. So that's something to bear in mind. Both of the dioxazine violet pigments that we were comparing earlier, it really looked like the Roman Schmoll was way more red than the Schminke one. I'd say that now that they're dry, it still is slightly more red than the Schminke one, but maybe not quite as pronounced as before. And I do really like them both. And you can see there was also a bit of a lightening on the dioxazine violet from Schminke here, whereas it was really like almost black when I put it down earlier. So you can be bold with these colors if you want the deeper shades. However, the mineral violet, because I think it's a multi-pigment color with the ultramarine in it, does dry a lot darker. So I think that the ultramarine is more of a heavy pigment, so it doesn't go through as much of a lightening when it dries, and it looks more purple, let's say, than the Aquarius violet. So it's a bit more of a true pinky purple, and it does have some separation that you can see there, where the quinacridone violet or red is separating out, and then the ultramarine is settling into the paper for this beautiful blue granulation. But in the mass tone, in the really deep colors, it is a really dark color. Actually, I'm really impressed with that color. So I don't know. I mean, this is obviously not anywhere close to the range of violets that are available in watercolor. I mean, it's a good taster though. I think a lot of brands use the same pigments and they tend to be relatively consistent in color, though the ultramarine pigments are quite interesting because there's this range from ultramarine blue to ultramarine pink, depending on how you treat it. So yeah, just a little nerdy anecdote on that one. But I hope that you enjoyed coming with me today while I swatched out all of these colours for you, and maybe you learned or saw something new that you hadn't considered before. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and stick around, press the subscribe button, and I'll be back with you in a couple of weeks with another video. Make sure to take care of yourself today. Bye everybody.